I also feel when people have said, does New York City really need another cultural institution? My response to that is pretty clear. When the lives of every single person who lives in New York City, adult and child, every single person is living an arts-saturated life, a performing arts-saturated life, then we could maybe begin to talk about, is there enough or is there too much?
Hello, and welcome to Art Restart, where we explore how artists are reinventing their fields and building a new landscape for the arts. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, which is brought to you by the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with theater director Bill Rauch, who is also the inaugural artistic director of the Perelman Arts Center in Lower Manhattan, also known as PAC NYC. I really wanted to interview Bill because, well, who in their right mind in the current arts climate, when performing arts venues are barely keeping the doors open, would want to lead a brand new, super expensive performing arts center? Well, Bill would. And he has. By all accounts, PAC's first season has been a resounding success, jam-packed with an astonishing array of music, dance, theater, and opera performances. Bill also capped the first season with a personal triumph, co-directing with Zhailon Levingston an inventive reimagining of the musical Cats, set in New York's drag ballroom scene. The production, titled Cats, the Jellicle Ball, garnered enthusiastic reviews and was immediately extended. In fact, if you're hearing this in July, know that you have until August 11th to catch it. Now, although Bill has decades of experience as an artistic director and producer, his previous posts were markedly different from the current. Right out of college, he founded Cornerstone Theater Company, a firmly community-devoted company that was initially nomadic, creating theater with and for small rural towns, before it finally put down roots in Los Angeles in 1992. Thereafter, Cornerstone continued to make homegrown, community-partnered theater in Los Angeles as well as in satellite projects around the country. Then in 2007, Bill became the artistic director of Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is a bit of a unicorn in the American theater ecosystem, in that it's one of the very few theaters in the US that still has a full-time acting company. It's also one of a handful of destination theaters in North America. Patrons travel to rural Southern Oregon from all over the country to enjoy a vacation chock full of theater. At OSF, while still centering Shakespeare's works, Bill diversified the theater's offerings and bolstered its new play development program. So, how has he adapted his community-centered ethos to leading New York's newest cultural landmark? Let's find out. I started by asking if he'd had any misgivings when 7 years ago, while still at OSF, he was first offered the position at PAC NYC.
Oh, yeah, I was terrified, honestly, when I first had a conversation with the search firm, when they reached out to me about the possibility, because it is music, dance, opera, as well as theater. I had a lot of fear about not knowing the other disciplines. I've been a theater artist my whole life, as you well know. And so I was scared about that. I was scared about the politicization of the site because, there's so many strong feelings about the World Trade Center campus and what happened on 9/11, just the site being on the ground of Port Authority owned land. And, that means the state of New York and the state of New Jersey and the city of New York and all those stakeholders. So there was a lot that gave me pause. But honestly, what overrode all of those hesitations was how moved I was that people felt that there needed to be arts and culture at the World Trade Center campus, and that one of the most meaningful ways to rebuild after 9/11 was by creating an arts and culture facility. And that moved me when I first heard about it, and it moves me to this very day. I think it's pretty extraordinary because ultimately the response to hatred is love, and the ultimate response to destruction is creativity and creation. And to be able to affirm life, to be able to celebrate community by bringing people together at this location felt so meaningful and so potentially impactful. And, it's not just 9/11, of course, because really there are 400 years plus of trauma and resilience in this part of the island, with everything from Dutch settlers and the massacre of Lenape and driving the Lenape people off the land, through enslaved New Yorkers being buried outside what was then city limits, the wave after wave after wave of immigrants that have entered our country through New York Harbor and through this part of the island, the Twin Towers being built as a symbol of international peace and then being destroyed, and the act of rebuilding and including arts and culture. Like, there's just so much trauma and so much resilience in this part of the island. We're also at a transportation hub. There are 13 subway
That's
lines
right.
within a few blocks of us, and the commuter train to New Jersey, and the Staten Island Ferry pretty close by. So we're blessed with being at a true transportation hub that can bring people together from all 5 boroughs and from the tri-state area. And that felt really, really potentially impactful in terms of how we bring people together.
Once you accepted the position, signed on some dotted line somewhere, what was your first order of business, and how much latitude did your board of directors give you?
Well, I gave the Oregon Shakespeare Festival almost 18 months notice. It was a good year and a half, and it meant that I was able to leave the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I hope, in a responsible way, being able to oversee what became my final season, the openings of all those shows, and giving time and space for a search for my successor, and just trying to raise as much money as possible before leaving the company. So I was part-time on this job for a year and a half before my family and I moved to New York in August of 2019. I would say, building a team was absolutely the highest priority, because there were in fact, I believe I'm the only full-time staff member still with the organization that was around then. It was an amazing but very, very small team of people who were really overseeing the construction project. So bringing in both our director of producing and programming, Mayan Wong, to begin on the programming vision, and also hiring our director of civic alliances, which is our name for community engagement. And
Could you talk about actually choosing civic alliance to describe that role rather than community engagement, which has generally been used?
Yeah, there's language is a gift and a curse, right? Because there are all the associations that people have with language that's already been used. So we came up with the term civic alliances, just trying to be precise about the kind of relationships we hope to build with community organizations. And it felt right, because it was about building alliances, and they were civic alliances in terms of our civic responsibility and opportunities being here at the World Trade Center. We have both what we call anchor alliances, which are ongoing relationships that last year after year, and then project-based alliances that are more about a specific project we're doing. So as an example, we did an opera, beautiful opera. Composer was Huang Ro, and the librettist is David Henry Huang. They created an opera about Danny Chen, who was a young man who lived in Manhattan, Chinatown, first generation. His parents are immigrants from China, and he served his country. He was in Afghanistan, and he was so racially hazed that it ended in his death. So it's a very tragic story. But because Danny was from Chinatown, and because his parents and so many community members are still part of that community, it was very important for us to build alliances with organizations in Chinatown connected to that project. While an example of among many, we have an ongoing relationship with the New York Immigration Coalition, because so much of the work that we've done has dealt with themes of immigration. So that is an ongoing relationship that
So
will
that's
go
one of
on
your
year after year.
anchor
That's one of your
alliances.
anchor alliances, exactly.
I see.
Yeah. So I would say, beginning to think about programming and beginning to think about our relationships with community organizations. Those were the first two orders of business for sure.
One of the things I've learned by interviewing so many amazing artist change makers is it's a refrain I hear that the model of expecting people to arrive at a cultural palace and adhering to the rules of engagement there is outdated, and that in fact perhaps the newer model is to bring art to the people, which is exactly what you did with Cornerstone. So here you are leading the brand newest, most glittery cultural palace in New York City. You've made it very welcoming to all, and I know you can talk about that, but how are you adapting your Cornerstone ethos to your new responsibility?
It's a really, really smart question, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I will say it is ironic because we used to talk in Cornerstone about bringing theater and creating theater in collaboration with communities. And we talked about, as opposed to the marble palaces that often exist in cities that are cultural palaces. And yes, I do indeed work in a building that is sheathed in 5,000 tiles of marble. And I'm aware of that irony. But I will say, for the reasons I was describing earlier, because we are at a transportation hub, because we're at a world famous site that everybody in our city, in our country, and in the world really has associations with because of the traumatic events of September 11th, I think we do have a rare opportunity to bring people together and create connections within our building. And I think because you can't pass through our doors on the way in to see a performance or to leave having seen a performance, the 9/11 memorial is right there. We are just a few yards away from the 9/11, the North Memorial Pool. It is right there. It is very present. It is our front yard. And so I do think that invitation to reflect more deeply on who we have been and who we aspire to be as a society, it's just always present. And I think it impacts the work. And I think that's part of the power of bringing people into the building. Very specifically, we do have an intimate lobby stage where we do a series of free performances every week, often every day. And, those bounce around the performance times, but they involve often our anchor alliances and other community partners. They involve emerging artists and they involve extraordinary established artists. And the fact that all those performances are free, the fact that our public spaces are open to the public free of charge from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Every day but Monday. So, you don't need, as one of my colleagues quipped, you don't need a dollar and you don't need a friend to enter PAC NYC.
Are you finding that New Yorkers, people in the neighborhood, or even since it's a transportation hub from as far as New Jersey, are they starting to claim the space as their community hub?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are 9 months in, and I'm trying to remind myself of that every day because we've done so much work in this inaugural season, and we've welcomed so many people in, but we're not even toddlers yet, right? We're 9 months old. So if we were a human being, we wouldn't be walking yet. So I am thrilled by how many people have found their way to us and the number of people I talk to who've been to multiple events. Of course, there are people who come because the subject matter of a work of art connects to their own lives, to their community. And we've seen a lot of that, but we're beginning to build an ongoing audience of people who believe in the mission, who are excited by the work, and who are coming back for multiple events.
Because that's, I mean, for me, that would be the dream that somebody who drops by a couple of times for the free concert looks around and says, oh, this looks interesting. I might actually buy a ticket.
Pier Carlo, we have the same dream. We have the exact same dream. Yes, yes, yes.
Glad to hear it. And is your first season, as you said, was so varied and honestly really exciting. Was your audience as varied as what you were offering?
Absolutely. It was really exciting to see audiences based on the discipline, based on the following of the artists based on the subject matter of the work. The audiences shifted from piece to piece. For instance, the one project that we were able to do in this inaugural season that we had developed first at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival at my former home was the 1491's extraordinary comedy Between Two Knees. The 1491s being an intertribal sketch comedy troupe. Some of its members, actually eventually all of the members, worked on the television show Reservation Dogs. And they are a remarkable group of artists, and they created a wonderful equal opportunity offender comedy about 90 years in a fictional Native American family, the history of that family. And, when all was said and done, we had a critic's pick from the New York Times, and many, many traditional theater goers came to the piece. But the audiences were also 30% Native American. And for, I think, any large budget cultural institution to have 30% Native audiences was certainly without precedent in my professional experience. And that was really, really thrilling because New York City has the largest indigenous population of any city in North America.
I did not know that.
But there's the mythology, right, that there are no Native people in New York City because they were driven away. And that is, a very destructive mythology that exists. So anyway, that was absolutely thrilling.
You mentioned PAC and you as its leader still being in your toddler stage. Was there a moment in these first 9 months or a performance or an event when you thought, okay, this is the first step and we're going to make it?
Honestly, I have felt that at so many times. It's hard to pinpoint one moment. I mean, our opening concerts, our first public programming was a series of 5 concerts on the theme of refuge that we created in collaboration with the musicians at Trinity Wall Street. And we had artists from so many different ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, artists from all over the world and also all over New York City. And each night was a different theme, sub-theme of refuge. So for instance, the first night was home as refuge. And it was for artists from other parts of the world who've made New York City their home. We had a night that was faith as refuge with artists from various faith backgrounds, et cetera. And each of those concerts, there would be 7, 8 acts in each concert that were bringing people together across such a wide spectrum of musical traditions and of cultural traditions. And they were so moving. They were so moving. And it was like, this is why this art center was built. This is why I joyfully accepted the challenge of being its inaugural artistic director. It was right there in those first 5 concerts.
At this point, how much pressure are you facing to prove success through your ticket sales? What are the expectations from the board of directors that PAC will sustain itself through ticket sales? And where are you now in terms of that earned revenue, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't know that I can give you numbers that would be completely accurate, but I will say one of the absolute most beautiful aspects of our building is its flexibility and its intimacy. We have 62 that we've identified so far, 62 stage audience configurations with our flexible spaces, and they are all quite intimate. And as an artist, I absolutely believe that some of the deepest work and some of the most impactful work can happen in the most intimate rooms. So as an artist, I cheer the intimacy of our spaces. As a business person, of course, the intimacy is a challenge because it means we can only raise so much at the box office. So earned income is not the biggest slice of the pie for us. And I would dare say that it probably never will be the biggest slice of the pie. We'll always be heavily reliant on contributed income because of the intimacy of the venues. Again, that's the building. That's what was designed. And I embrace it and I celebrate it. But it does mean that contributed subsidy will always be necessary to create the most meaningful works of art we can.
I have a somewhat awkward question, which is, Is getting funding for an arts enterprise in New York kind of a zero-sum game? Is everyone competing for the same cultural money, the same donors? And given that sadly so many New York performing arts institutions are really struggling these days, does that make things awkward for you with other cultural leaders in the city?
I appreciate you raising a sensitive subject. And look, here's what I will say. Sincerely, we want to be part of the larger community of arts makers and arts institutions in this city. We want to collaborate. One of our first commissioned dance works was with Big Dance Theater, Annie B. Parsons' company. Our opera that I referenced earlier, the orchestra was American Composers Orchestra, and that was a deep collaboration. And I can go on and on with examples, but we want as many projects as possible to be collaborations with other arts organizations, both within our city and around the country and even around the world. We feel like in terms of viability of paying for the work, collaboration is essential. But it's also, we're here at the World Trade Center. It's about creating connections. It's about bringing people together. It's about really being in the business of creating hope. And so collaboration is really at the spiritual heart as well. With all that said, it's a very challenging moment for the performing arts in general. It's a challenging moment for the performing arts in New York City. This was a very expensive building to build, and I'm, not unaware of that potential tension, right? That all this money was spent to build a new cultural facility, and that might be challenging for some folks. But we are going to keep, for all the reasons that we've been discussing in this conversation, in terms of what can we do here at this location that can help other organizations in our city and that can be part of collaborations and that can, we can dig deep in terms of our alliances and, create work that's meaningful and that contributes to the big picture of performing arts. I also feel when people have said, does New York City really need another cultural institution? My response to that is pretty clear. When the lives of every single person who lives in New York City, adult and child, every single person is living an arts saturated life, a performing arts saturated life, then we could maybe begin to talk about, is there enough or is there too much? But we have so many miles and miles to go before we collectively as a field are successfully reaching everybody who lives in our city. So much work to do. So I do feel like the zero-sum game, it's understandable why you would ask the question or why anybody would think about it. But I think that really only applies when you think about there being a very finite pool of audience or a very finite pool of resources. And I just think from the audience viewpoint alone, there is so much work we have to do in the city and so much good work being done by so many of our peers. And we want to be part of that. And we want to continue to elevate that.
With your first season concluded, is there anything you wish you could go back and whisper to yourself 6 years ago when you accepted the position?
Don't put so much energy into being afraid of the disciplines that you don't know anything about, because in a way it's all theater. It's all storytelling. It's all through these other extraordinary disciplines, whether it's music or dance or opera or boundary blurring works of art, that it's hard to even categorize what they are, multidisciplinary works of art. All of it lives in an impulse that artists have to share with audiences and to make connections with audiences. I am the first to admit that my ignorance in the other disciplines is vast, but I feel more confident that when artists have impulses and we're able to help them realize those impulses, either by commissioning, developing, or presenting something, it's the same work that I've devoted my whole life to. It's just some different forms, which are really, really fun to be able to explore.
I don't know if have you announced your next season yet?
We have not. We
You
have
have
not.
not.
We're trying to maximize our learnings from this year right on through our current run of Cats. And, we may not be announcing, I think it's becoming more common that people are announcing chunks of years rather than a full year. So we may be doing that. But
That's interesting. So it's kind of doing away with the traditional, here's your 12-month season.
Yeah, absolutely. At Oregon Shakespeare Festival, we always announce the entire season down to every single performance and exactly what time they would start. And I do feel like the current climate is calling for more flexibility and more, what's the word I'm looking for, agility in terms of being able to be responsive. So we're trying to hit all those balances.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you. I was going to ask you what project in the next season you're most looking forward to. Instead, then, I'm going to ask if you can talk about if you know what your next directing project is.
I don't know what my next directing project will be at PAC NYC, but I can tell you that I am really honored to be working with the great theater composer and librettist Michael John LaChiusa on a new musical that he has written. And, we're not sure where that will land in terms of when it might be shared with the world, but it's been really fun to work on it. And it's a project that deals with a total eclipse of the sun. And we were actually able to do a little concert of excerpts of that project down in Waco, Texas, and then experience totality together with this most recent eclipse. And that was a very, very powerful experience.
If you'd like to read a longer written version of the interview and see some images from Cats, the Jellicle Ball, just go to uncsa.edu/artrestart. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our episodes, we'd so appreciate it if you would let your people know about it. We're on all the podcast platforms and therefore very easy to share. Cats is playing through August 11th, so if there are any tickets left, try to grab one. It looks fantastic. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, and on behalf of the Keenan Institute for the Arts, thank you for listening.